Recording is on.
Okay, so Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment acknowledges that the residents of Watertown live on land that is the traditional territory of the Pequawset people, a band of the indigenous Massachusetts tribe. The Pequawset cared for and stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. The English language rendering of the indigenous name of Watertown is Pigsgusset, which to the best of our knowledge means the meadows at the widening of the river. We recognize that indigenous erasure and attempted genocide are still happening today and demand supportive action and solidarity. Let us remember the achievements of Pigsgusset peoples and the ongoing struggles of their descendants as we reflect on how we can be good visitors and stewards of this place we call home.
Wow. Very nice.
And I will quickly just kind of read out the agenda, which is fairly straightforward. And the minutes to our last month's meeting, Deborah has put into the chat if you want to take a look. We've in COVID times, we've left it to the steering committee to approve the minutes at each meeting. So it hasn't been practical to have all the people who were there at each meeting and approve the minutes or not. So in the agenda, first we'll just hear just a very brief, like 2-minute working group reports. And after that, we'll move into our presentation with Jean and Brucey from Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways. And thank you for being with us. We're delighted to have you here. And it's a perfect day and perfect time to be focusing on plants and pollinators. After that, we'll have some Q&A, comments, discussion, and then at the end, announcements that people may have. And if we have time before 8:30, we can do a little bit of brainstorming on whatever is on your mind for Watertown citizens to consider in the future. So with that, I will ask whoever would like to give a report on Watertown Faces Climate Change Working Group. You're muted, Deborah. You're still muted. Don't know why you can't unmute. Let's see if it's possible.
Ah, now it goes. Okay. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So Watertown Faces Climate Change, as usual, has been showing up at lots of meetings, the new school construction meetings, planning board meetings, development meetings, advocating every chance we get for really aggressive emission standards and a robust shuttle system in Watertown and other environmentally friendly features. We have representatives on the, I think it's called the Stakeholder Committee for the town's climate action plan for meeting energy goals. And so they're actively advocating there too. And I hope some of you saw the recent sign holding we did on the section of Galen Street Bridge against pipeline funders. And coming up is an opt-up campaign with WE3C, Sunrise, and XR. And we're hoping to distribute door hangers to every door in Watertown, urging residents to opt up to 100% renewable electricity. So we're going to be reaching out to the entire Watertown Citizens community to help us. It's a big task. So stay tuned.
Thank you. You've reminded me that our 3-year contract with a former energy, with another energy company is now up. And we have, my husband and I have until the middle of June to make a change so we can opt up finally.
So you were doing 100% anyway, but now you get to do it under Watertown.
No, we weren't doing 100% at all. We were just doing, it's a 3-year-old contract that we couldn't get out of.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
it'd be nice to do much better.
Yes.
Pam, anything on Friends of Bees you'd like to share?
Yes, well, we've been busy. We just did a big event and the part of the Watertown Department of Public Works, we did a pollinator planting there. Putting together a quick write-up about it to share. And we're planning to do a plant swap on the first Saturday of June. That will be at the Grove Street location of Watertown Community Gardens. And I'm expecting to do a bee talk of some sort at for the Mount Auburn Cemetery during Pollinator Week. So,
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to give a brief report on the refugee support group. We our meeting just last week, we had a wonderful guest, Jay Putin-Vital, who used to live in Watertown and who in the past had worked on a number of campaigns, local campaigns with. Jay is now working for he's just this past several months, I think, or several weeks, he's been working for the American Red Cross for their international program called Restoring Family Links. And he wanted to share information about this as another resource for our refugee support group, which is great. And they're just helping to reconnect people who have gone missing. And it was just fascinating to hear what a difficult and often depressing and frustrating job it is, and not always very successful, and gave us a lot of examples of the kinds of cases that he's been working on. But it was great to see Jay. And 2 of our special families have all had COVID go rampantly through them. Well, in each case, 5 family members, 2 parents and 3 kids. So that's been pretty rough. But it does mean that since they're all over it now, those of us who are vaccinated can actually visit them in person, which is the only upside of that. So, and otherwise, we're just working really hard for the next few weeks on our big June 27th fundraiser with cellist Yo-Yo Ma. So, which is quite exciting. And oops, my screen just went crazy. And we've gotten one quick notice out about it that Deborah was able to put into the most recent newsletter, and we'll be sending out more information about it, and now have a flyer, and we'll try to get the word out. So keep in mind to save the date, June 27th at 7:30 p.m. It will be virtual. It will be live streamed. And we are so excited to have Yo-Yo Ma having come forward and offered to do a fundraiser for us, which is really great. Any questions about it, you can get in touch with me. Watertown Citizens for Black Lives. Arun, would you like to give an update? Arun, are you there? I guess not. Well, we'll see. Well, why don't we go on to the Pigs Gusset Initiative, and if Arun...
I'm here.
Oh, you are there.
I just had trouble getting to the right screen. We're planning something for the 25th, which is the tragic anniversary of George Floyd's death. And we are planning our normal meeting on first Monday in June, and the first vigil the Monday and first Tuesday in June, which is actually the day after the first Monday in June. And we're also planning something for Juneteenth, but we're not really clear on that. For the 25th, we're having a Zoom reflection on the past year of how our thoughts and the movement have changed. And in the evening, we're going to have a candlelight vigil in Watertown Square.
Thank you. Yeah, tough anniversary coming up. Jennifer, would you be willing to give a quick update on the Pigs Gusset Initiative Working Group?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. I think there are 2 main things that I want to share with people. And some people may already know that the Pigs Gusset Initiative is working with the New Repertory Theater to present the Listen to Sipu play that's starting June 4th and will be running through, I think, July 11th. I will post in the chat the information about the production. Some of us were able to attend the read-through of the screening, and it's going to be a fabulous show. It's only an hour. It's going to be at the Commander's Mansion. And it really is addressing the history of Indigenous people in the area that we now call Watertown, also known as Pigs Gusset. So I think it will be a great experience for all of us to go to. And one of the things that I think is really wonderful about the New Rep Theater is that they're using this presentation, this play, as a launching pad and engagement for people to do more to address Indigenous people and their erasure within our culture and to bring them back into our present. So I'm excited. I've already got my tickets and I have a friend coming with me, and I think hopefully everybody can join in. The other thing that I want to let people know is that tomorrow at the State House, there is going to be a hearing from the Education Committee about the legislation addressing Native American mascots in school districts. And we really want to encourage people to either provide testimony or to send a letter. And so I'm also going to post in the chat information about how to do that. So, you know, having mascots is a huge issue in communities. And when we do it on a community by community basis, it's really kind of crazy. So if we do it as a state and just ban the mascots, which most Native American groups are supporting, then it will make a big difference. So I'm just going to post that in the chat. And I think those are the two main things right now. We have other things in the works and we'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Jennifer. I just want to mention just the walking live sort of outdoor play, SIPU, that we're collaborating with New Rep Theater, has a maximum of 30 people per show. So you can kind of keep that in mind as if you're thinking about getting some tickets in order to keep it more intimate. And there'll be some audience participation involved, actually. I just want to back up for 1 second. I forgot to mention that formerly known as Watertown Citizens for Black Lives, that the working group has changed its name to Watertown Community for Black Lives.
We're in the process.
In the process.
We're not actually, we haven't told the membership yet, so.
Okay, all right. So it's in process that they may change their name to Watertown Community instead of Watertown Citizens. And it's an interesting issue that's been brought up, and it can be really a meaningful conversation. And the steering committee of Watertown Citizens for Peace, Justice, and the Environment will take it up in the future. See how that might impact or be considered by the group at large. So that completes our working group reports. And now we can move on to tonight's featured presentation by Jean and Brucey. So welcome again. And Sarah.
And Sarah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I missed that part.
That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah, well, I forgot to put her. So I'd like to welcome Jean Devine and Brucey Moulton and Sarah Wang of the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways. And I really owe a big debt of gratitude to your whole organization, because you guys really kept me going on the bee track last year when I was just feeling totally overwhelmed. But you were, you gave me something I could attend and actually, start working on bees again. So Jean is one of the heads of the Meadow Makers. They are an organization that helps young people learn how to run a business and plant gardens and meadows for pollinators. And Brucey Moulton is in the steering committee of Sustainable Arlington. And Sarah Wang has been putting together our map that shows how where all the pollinator gardens are. And the whole goal is to try to connect things to make it easier for bees and other insects to travel on these pathways. And they're all gardeners. and they all bring organizational skills and know-how to the issue of pollinators. So please go ahead.
All right. So I'm just going to share some slides. Thank you for that introduction. Where are we? I'm going to share. It's right over here. That's funny. I have to log in again. I had it all set up, but it won't let me go over. Oh, maybe it will.
Meanwhile, Sarah has dropped into the chat the handout for tonight's presentation. You'll find that many of the resources that we mentioned are included in the handout. There'll be lots of links, including to our map and the survey that Sarah will be talking about later. And there'll be bonus items that we may not even get to, but we hope you'll find all of them useful.
Can you see this slideshow?
Not yet.
All right, so I do, but you don't. So that's not good. Sorry about that. So I have to log out for some reason and log back in. I don't know why.
You should see a share button.
Yeah, and it was already loaded up on my drive, but for some reason it was. Sorry, oh gosh, technical difficulties.
I'm starting to feel that Zoom is being stalked by technical difficulties these days. I've been on several calls this past week where things didn't go as planned, but look, Jean, you've got it already.
No, it's, yeah, I'm zoomed out personally. Well, thanks for inviting us. And I'm just going to give you, as you said, Barbara Passero is here. She and I co-founded Meadowscaping for Biodiversity and intentional gardening. That's creating gardens with the intention of attracting pollinators and serving a function to build a healthy and resilient community. Ties in very well with everything you all are talking about. A year ago, we were giving a talk at Sustainable Belmont, and both Brucey and Sarah were there. And toward the end, the talk was about how to garden with native plants. And I said that our students sell native plants, and it's a little bit challenging for them to convince adults that native plants are really important for the environment. And we were thinking of ways to get communities on board with the idea that we just need more critical mass to embrace this idea, because we're running out of time. You know, these bees, these butterflies are really suffering. And at the end of the talk, Brucey said, well, why don't we have a challenge? Why don't we have some kind of competition between the town of Belmont, which is where I was making this presentation, and the town of Arlington? Well, I sort of took her up on that thing and followed up. We had some conversations, and that's really how we pulled together some people to launch this organization. I'm now going to let Brucey talk about the organization and what we aim to do here.
So the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathways group takes its name from the Mystic River watershed and the Charles River watershed. Those are on the map, those are the yellow communities that make up all of those two watersheds together. But that's a big space. So that pink circle you see in the upper part of the yellow area is the area that we're focusing on now, the inner Charles and the Mystic. And the idea behind our group is to bring together people who are enthusiastic gardeners, as well as beginning gardeners who want to garden to support our native insects and especially our native pollinators. The way to do that is with native plants, because as you'll hear later, native plants and native pollinators have evolved together over millennia, and need to work together as a crucial part of our ecosystem. Sarah, who's talking about this tonight, will be talking about the maps that she's been developing. So first of all, I'd like to ask how many of you have gardens? Maybe a show of hands?
No.
A little one.
Yeah, and any size garden is great.
Not
You
this
had-
year because, well, oops.
That's okay. Arun, go ahead. Were you saying something about gardens?
Oh, I got into a car accident last fall and I haven't been able to garden this year.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
In fact, everything is full of weeds and I can't pull them because I can't bend down that way.
Aha, you need a gardening support system. Anyway, I hope you get back to gardening soon. So when you look at a garden or when you think about a garden, what does a garden mean to you? And I invite responses. What does a garden mean to you when you look at it or when you think about it?
I've always described it as a respectable way for adults to go play in the dirt.
Yes.
Sarah's got something.
That's much better than what I was gonna say, which is a means to keep my sanity.
For me, it's also a combination of the vegetable part of my garden. And my vegetable garden is obviously for being able to grow organic, wonderful, delicious food. And the flower garden is a way that I love to bring beauty to my neighbors who are walking by my street.
That might be a good segue to the next picture. What do you think, Brucey?
I mean, that's
So the garden means many different things to us. What does a garden mean to a pollinator? And what does planting for pollinators mean? If you think about what does a garden mean to a pollinator, do you have answers to that?
Want me to go? Advance?
What am I doing here?
Uh-oh.
So do you want answers now or do you want to tease it out by showing some pictures?
Let's see if we let's see if we can possibly mute Barbara. Do we have a way to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. She's all set. Great. Well, she figures out her computer.
Okay.
Mute.
All right, so why don't we go on? Why don't we move on to the next slide? So this is a garden that is likely to be very pleasing to human eyes. It's full of color, very varied shapes of flowers. How does that garden make you feel when you look at it? Okay, so now, how does that same garden look to a pollinator? Let's go on for that to that next slide. So here we have little plastic flowers superimposed on all those beautiful real flowers. And that's because for native pollinators, these non-native flowers, even though they're beautiful, don't register as sources of pollen and nectar. They're not host plants for our native pollinators. In fact, next slide, please.
Sorry, I get stuck here.
It is a food desert. And we think about food deserts from a human perspective, but it's a great term to talk about what our native pollinators see when they encounter not only a real sand desert, which would be a food desert for many of them, but also for giant swaths of farmland that are planted in a single crop, such as soy or corn, or perfect wide expanses of lawn, the great American lawn, often composed of just one or two non-native grass species and maintained to keep out all the flowering broadleaf things that are called weeds, but in fact, many of which support pollinators. We have also got to think in terms of the plight of our pollinators. Not only have we created food deserts through the massive alteration of landscapes as they existed before European colonization, but in our ongoing practices, we use massive amounts of pesticides on lawns, conventional agriculture. Urbanization results in habitat fragmentation. Deforestation is an issue. Climate change is having and will continue to have a massive impact on native pollinators. And when I talk about native pollinators, there are over 4,000 species in the United States and several hundred just here in Massachusetts. But as the climate changes, as things heat up, as precipitation patterns change, as native plant populations change in response to that, what will happen to our native pollinators? So traditional landscaping as it's come to be practiced in the last 100 years is really not sustainable for our local ecosystems, including pollinators. And it weakens the soil so that the soil loses its health. It isn't able to absorb water as well. It absorbs less carbon. In fact, it may give up the carbon that it has stored. So we really need to garden as if all life depends on it, because in fact, it does.
So I'm going to take you on a little tour of why native plants matter. This is my little teachery section. At the heart of all these native pollinator gardens are native plants. This is something that students may encounter in 3rd grade, again in 4th, maybe in 7th, learning about the food web. All energy, we get all energy from the sun, but not directly. We get it from eating something, a plant that has absorbed the energy from the sun, or eating something that ate that plant. So this is your typical food chain that shows the plant is eaten by the grasshopper. Moving up the chain, the mole eats the grasshopper, and the the owl eats the mole, and then something decomposes, goes into the ground. You have a full cycle, and you come back to the plant that's hardy there. Plants serve a purpose, and the purpose they want to procreate, but actually for us, they're the base of our food. But these food chains are very local. Local ecosystems depend on local food webs. And the reason that we get into native plants is native plants are the plants that were on this continent before the European settlers brought their plants over here. And insects and butterflies and pollinators, all species evolved together with those plants. So they know how to eat those plants. Plants put up defenses. They don't really want to be eaten, but these species, because they've lived here long enough, have developed a system where they know how to eat. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. The plant needs the pollinator to procreate, and the pollinator needs the plant for food. So I've changed this to make it look like this plant is a producer plant, happens to be turtlehead, happens to be a favorite for some of the smaller bees. See that little button there? But it's also a host plant for the Baltimore checker spot caterpillar. And to be a host plant means that the butterfly has laid its eggs, and as the larva begins to develop, it can find a way to navigate any poisons in that plant and actually eat it to grow, to go through the whole life cycle of a butterfly. Meanwhile, our birds, our baby birds, need protein. And what's one of the softest proteins that can be fed? A worm, a caterpillar, a small larva. So it's really important to be able to offer some caterpillars that don't go all the way to becoming a butterfly to our baby birds. This planet has tons of beetles, and we're about to get our cicadas. Those cannot be eaten by baby birds because their skeleton is really hard to swallow. So a caterpillar is a really important part of the food web. And then meanwhile, we have our hawk waiting for lunch. So that completes the cycle. This is our local ecosystem. These are all the plants and creatures you would see right here in Massachusetts. So what happens if this gets frayed? Well, this also shows, this is the web. It's a combination of what we're eating and where we are living. And these creatures are all dependent upon each other. If the snake were to die, would the entire fabric of this web fall apart? Maybe not. But if the snake and the titmouse begins to fray, the snake, the titmouse, the mouse, so you start to go into urban areas where you see only one species of bird, like a pigeon, or you go into a forest and you don't see wildlife. That's the evidence of a frayed biodiverse ecosystem. What we teach our kids, what we teach adults, what we are screaming high is we've got to restore biodiversity. And where do we get to restore it? In our own backyard. So a little bit about the relationship. Native plants need native pollinators so that they can develop their procreation system, and native pollinators need native plants. They evolve together. They have special relationships. There are a lot of bees that need a certain pollen. Not all pollen is the same. There are a lot of butterflies who can only lay its eggs on one. The best example is the monarch can only lay its eggs on milkweed and nothing else. And that's the food for the baby monarch. So we're looking at specialized relationships. And if you satisfy the specialized, you can then provide food for general populations, meaning general species. It's really neat. If you're in your garden, you might notice that a certain insect is attracted to a plant. Well, the plant's pretty smart in finding a way to attract that insect. If it's white, often that would be attracting something that sees it at night, a moth, a bat. But just the structure, the color, the scent, the taste, these are all methods that the plant uses to attract the pollinator. So the lower one shows a bat with a long tongue. That fits into that cactus plant as a way for him to get food. Meanwhile, the bat is picking up pollen and going to the next plant. You'll often see the whole aster family, largest family in the animal kingdom, this coneflowers in the aster family. Butterflies can land on asters. That's a landing pad for them. So you'll see butterflies there, and you certainly see bees. And then tubular, they're all different ones, but the more you know the features of your native plant, the more you can predict who will come there. So the next is just talking about if a native plant needs a pollinator to help it spread its seed, a native pollinator needs a native plant for pollen, for nectar, and for host plants. The adults are those that get the nectar. That's giving you energy, like sugar water. But pollen, and this is pretty recent that I've learned this, not all of our at-risk bees in Massachusetts can get pollen from our native plants. They look for specific native plants for specific types of pollen to put into their nest for their brood. And as I said, certain caterpillars, like the Eastern tiger swallowtail, can lay its eggs on about 8 different plants, but the monarch, the checker spot, the fritillary, a lot of the fritillaries need a specific host. So native plants are at the heart of this food web. And by being at the heart, they're enabling all this other intersection of life in the garden. So that's your nexus. I'm going to invite Sarah in really soon. what we've done with our map, and she's going to give you a tour, is you can not only see a dot where a native plant garden is, but you can also see pictures. And we pulled out 3 that show a beautiful garden that's also a functional garden that serves the needs of pollinators. This one's in Somerville. This one in Arlington. And this one is in Watertown. I don't know if any of you recognize that, but I'm going to stop now and I'm going to let Sarah give you a tour of the map. The one thing that Brucey, I wanted us to say is that when we came together, we were about, the first meeting had maybe 20 people from 8 towns, and we all wore different hats. We were all concerned about pollinators, but some sustainable folks came, some people who have been on conservation commissions. So it was really, it's been a really interesting intersection of interests, and we're learning a lot from each town on how we handle different best practices and different issues. All right, Sarah,
All
here.
right. I'm trying to find the right screen to share. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, has anyone in this room put their garden, if you have a native plant garden, on the pollinator map?
Can you see the map?
Yeah,
Okay, you can see my cursor running around on it?
yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so,
Eventually I'll get on the map.
sorry?
Sorry, eventually I'll get on the map.
Okay.
So one of the first things our group decided that we needed to do was to make a map to document native plant gardens in our area. We wanted to see how much pollinator habitat we have, right? So these are all the native plant gardens we've collected so far. This is 85 entries. There's one down here in Medfield. There's one out here in Natick, but all of the rest of them are on here. So, and they basically follow the 95 loop, right? This is Newton out to Waltham, Lexington, Winchester. So we're right in the middle, like Arlington, Belmont, Watertown, Cambridge, Somerville. So it's very easy to get on the map. Let me just show you. This is the legend that's on the side of the map, and you click these down arrows, they expand, right? So this is where you can get links to the surveys to get your site on the map. And first I'll talk about public green spaces. That's this link. Public green spaces we have on the map are brown. Brown mean, okay, so what we ask on this survey, if you have a public green space that you'd like to put on the map, you can fill out a very simple survey which asks about 2 things. One is, does it have native plantings? And 2, does it use pesticides? So any brown site that you see means that they have native plantings, but we haven't been able to confirm whether they use chemical pesticides. So this is a brown tree. A tree means it's a big open, it's a green space. A flower means that it's actually a planted garden. So, for example, so all of these entries are alphabetical. So if you want to find something, let me see. Fresh Pond Reservation, right here, is a green tree right here that we have been able to confirm does not use chemical pesticides. And then I'm just going to increase, whoops. Then maybe you know this place, Aberdeen Avenue. They have a big median down the middle where I'm not sure who in Cambridge has been in charge of planting these 6 areas of the median with native plants. To get your own home garden on the map, we have a fun and informative survey. Again, it's up here. And And it's an easy checklist asking about 3 criteria. One is that we ask for a pledge to avoid chemical pesticides. The second is a pledge or whether you have an actual garden with 6 native plant species. And the third is to pledge to do 3 practices to support pollinator habitat. And those are things like providing water sources, not raking up your leaves in the fall to provide habitat, or to not mow your lawn, to mow your lawn less, or to get rid of your lawn, things like that. So the basic listing is the yellow flower. Here are the yellow flower section. And some people are very concerned about privacy. So you can provide, whoops, what is that? You can provide as little information as you want. I just want to show you this actual entry in Watertown. Oh, it's so hard for me to see. Here it is, right here. Let me increase the size. So here it is. And this person just wanted to put their native garden on the map, but they didn't really want to share any other information. And this is what you see on the map if you're doing this. You do have to give us your exact street address, and I will be showing you why in a moment, but we don't share that information if you don't want to share that information. So you can, if you don't have enough plant species, but you want to pledge, you can also pledge. Here's a person from Arlington who pledged to put in 6 native plant species, and we give you a gray flower. And when you've fulfilled your pledge, get back to us and we'll change the color of your flower. But the thing is so most people actually do want to share. They want to show off their progress and they want to talk about their gardening conditions. Jean showed you 3 pictures, and those were from our map project. What we did is we set up an armchair tour. So you can click on any entry with an asterisk, and that means the gardener has supplied photographs of their garden. So let me show you a Watertown one. So here is a Watertown garden. Takes a little time to load.
Have the address so people may know whose it is.
Yeah. So look at that. That's just so amazing.
Beautiful plethora.
Yeah. With
Homestead.
some perennial mist flower.
This flower, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Joe Pye?
Milk.
Or
Is that Joe Pye? Yeah.
Joe Pye, yeah, I think.
And I think this is Chelone with black-eyed Susans, right? It looks like Chelone. So you can, if you're looking for inspiration, you can just come to this map and click on any entry with a asterisk and check out what your neighbors are doing or have done. But even better, what we've done is made it so that you can set up your own live garden tour. So in the time of COVID, we wanted to do a garden tour, but how do you do that? We put it on the map so that you can set your own with social distancing. The red flowers indicate demonstration gardens. These are people who have gardens that are visible from their sidewalk, from the sidewalk. There's 70% native, and they have given permission to post their addresses. So you can design a tour yourself, you know, go to Cambridge, for example, or Belmont, or Anyway, so let me show you an example of that. So this is 70 Park Ave. And I'm going to load the pictures for you so you can see it. And I'm sorry, they provide this nice little narrative. They said that they're on the Watertown Cambridge Greenway and that most of their gardens are on the south side of the house. The house and gardens can also be seen from the Cambridge Watertown Greenway bike path. They moved into this house in January 2019. They're renovating the house and gardens, and almost all the plants are native to this region. They also tend the greenway next to their house, pulling invasives and encouraging native shrubs and wildflowers. So here are some pictures from their garden, which I assume you could actually go and see. This is Eastern Shooting Star, penstemon with a little bee stuck in it. Butterfly weed. And this, I assume, is their garden by the public way. Okay, so what we show on this map are all contributions that we're making to restoring habitat for pollinators. But I think you can also clearly see that what we have collected is clearly not enough. What we have really are just some oases in the food desert. And we're trying to show this by illustrating this on the map with these 3 different colored links. Now I have to show you, let's see. Okay, so there are 3 different colored links, and the first one is the blue line, this blue shaded area. Blue lines show distances of up to 1,800 feet between 2 sites. And this is a distance that large bees like bumblebees on average can forage. Purple lines show distances of up to 1,500 feet, where medium bees like mason bees and of course large bees can forage. So this triangle here. And then for the very tiniest bees, the sweat bees, they can fly up to 300 feet. And this is 2 houses in Somerville, which are right next door to each other. And we basically have only 2 links on this map where sweat bees can travel from one garden to another. Overall, as you can see, let me zoom out so you can just see generally how many links there are. Just not very many is what I'm trying to show you. Is we don't have many links at all. So what we're hoping is that you can join our movement and you can get on our map with your garden to help create more links so that we can build on these food oases to make real pollinator pathways.
Great. And if you take the pledge and you want some help installing your garden, we have students that can do that. So they're working now, so don't be shy. Thank you, Sarah. Just have a few. We're now gonna go into show you a few of what we're calling powerhouse plants. We've come up with this definition: powerhouse native plants to give the best return. We talked earlier about bees specializing, needing certain pollen, butterflies needing certain plants. If you can satisfy the needs of some of the specialists, you can have enough food for your generalists. The other point in making a native plant garden is to think of the foraging season from early spring. I'm sure you saw bees emerging in April. Sometimes they come out in March and they're like, where's breakfast, right? And they go, bees, butterflies, lots of insects go all the way till November looking for some food. So it's really important to pull your garden together to have different food for different times of year. The definition of powerhouse that we've sort of created ourselves is we took the literature of Doug Tallamy, our guru, who is focusing on host plants, larval host plants for butterflies and moths. So, and he's the one that claims 90% of native insects have developed specialized relationships. We're also looking at the work of, maybe we don't have it in the slide, Dr. Robert Jagir, who has been looking at at-risk bees and at-risk bees in the state of Massachusetts and the certain pollen that they need. So reminder here, pollen is the baby food for bees, nectar, the energy food for adults, and the host plant is the baby food for butterflies and moths. This happens to be a blue-stemmed goldenrod. It's the only goldenrod that can work in the shade, and it satisfies all three of these criteria: the pollen, the nectar, and the host plant. And it grows later in the season. So isn't that great? So native plants, we're going to just go through some trees, shrubs, plants, and over seasons to show you some powerhouse host plants that you can buy in this area. So it's not looking for rare things you have to order in from some other place. They're right here. If you have no space but to put one tree, plant an oak, because the oak is the host to over 500 types of Lepidoptera. Coming in second are the birches. The willows come pretty close to that, as do black cherry. So these are all great picks for trees, but who has space for a tree in Watertown or Boston or Cambridge? Sort of hard. Keep them though, if you're walking in the woods or someone wants to chop down trees. Hate to see them come down. Smaller trees, these make sense. And whenever we could show a photo that is from someone's submission on the map, we indicate that. So we have a beautiful red bud from Sarah's backyard that peaked blooming just 2 weeks ago. So you've probably seen this purple. This is a really pretty tree. Willows are great. The eastern cedar, and then we have this American holly, and you get 2 bangs for the buck with a bush like a holly. You get the flowers in the spring for the bees, and you get the berries in the fall, or in this case, the winter, for the birds. Why won't you let me go to the next? I'm stuck here. All right, some shrubs, viburnum. People know there are wonderful native viburnums, and there are a few non-native. We really encourage you to go for native because that's going to be the food for our local ecosystem. Blueberry is a great pick, high bush and low bush. Here's your holly again, scrubby St. John's wort, and who can't like a mountain laurel? And this bush works in the shade, so that's a nice feature of that. I mentioned violets earlier. Tons of violets that are wonderful bee food, and you've seen probably the bird's foot coming up, and this white one. Barbara and I were visiting a garden today, and we saw a white one in our garden. We've never seen that before, so that was a nice surprise brought in by who knows, bird or ant, but welcome. The red columbine has probably peaked, one of the earlier bloomers. This looks almost like the climbing trumpet vine, but it's against a trumpet vine. Red is a great plant for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love red flowers. They like tubular flowers. Very smart bird. What are you saying, Sarah?
It's actually Lana Sarah. It's the honeysuckle vine.
Honeysuckle. So,
yeah.
And the columbine in front of it. Okay,
Right.
That's very pretty. That's very pretty. This Ziziaptera, golden Alexander, I see that, Pam, if you're listening, I see that you guys planted this over the DPW. Very nice. That's in bloom right now. Wild geranium is also in bloom. And the Zizia aurea, it's a little, yeah, I think this is coming out now as well. When you get into early summer, one of my favorites is this beard tongue penstemon. And if you happen to walk along the banks of Alewife Reservation, it's growing in just sea and sea of this one plant. It's absolutely beautiful. There's the honeysuckle, trumpet, and the other penstemon. Milkweed, you can't have enough milkweed, but you know which one's the thug. I mean, the common milkweed is beautiful. If it's happy in your garden, it will let you know pretty early on. Beautiful fragrance. These are the 3 milkweeds for New England. That there are other native milkweeds in the country, but these are the ones that work in New England. And this is the order in the bloom time. I'm a fan of the middle one, swamp milkweed, really easy to divide. And the smell to me is like marshmallow fluff. The common is very, very flowery. I like the smell of the common. The butterfly to me doesn't have a smell, but its best feature, not only being orange, is that it's a lower plant. So you can put it in the front of your garden. So that's a nice choice. Getting into the bee balms, these are wonderful for our bees. They're also, it's hard to see, but this red one here, the Stidima, has a tube. So this bee needs a bit of a tongue to get in there to get anything of merit. And then you have the wild bergamot, enjoyed by both bees and butterflies. Midsummer, I see that the DPW also planted Joe Pye weed. This baby gets pretty tall, beautiful rose pink, and butterflies love this, as do some bees. In the same in the same family as boneset. Moving over, great blue lobelia. Both of these lobelias like moisture, and the cardinal flower a little bit more than the great blue. I love the great blue. Now we're getting into July through early September. There are some roses that do work, are native. A lot of the roses you see are not native, but if you can get this Virginia rose, also from a Belmont member of our map. Fruit trees, this blackberry is, this is a late bloomer, I guess. The raspberry, and one of my faves is the turtlehead. And that comes a little later in August. Now, this is my absolute favorite, is goldenrod, because it's provides so much food to so many species that you can't go wrong. And it's one of the later bloomers. And there's so many varieties of goldenrod. So you can fit the blue one, and the gray goldenrod are smaller for a smaller garden. And then you get into these solidagos. These get pretty big on the right. But look at how happy our little bees are. The other, you can't not plant an aster. So these are asters. Some of them, the middle would work in sun, but the 2 on the right and left will work in shade. And again, earlier I said the aster family is the largest plant family, and you'll have a lot of foraging for your creatures going on here. Asters are easy to split too. I think that's the end of these powerhouses. Oh, grasses. Don't forget your grasses, and leave the grasses through the winter. Those seed heads are feeding a lot of your mammals, and let them forage as they will. But the colors of these are just beautiful. My favorite is the purple lovegrass in the upper right, because it reminds me of 4th of July. But that's a nice addition to your garden. We're not going to do the invasive plants because we figure this will take a little bit too long. I think what we'd like to do now is entertain some questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
And people, and please feel, anyone who wants to ask a question, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll take questions. I was wondering, this is really a question for Sarah. How did you draw the lines on the map? Was it manual, or do you have a GIS tool?
It's everything is learn it yourself on the Google map. They have a feature called draw a line or shape, and then they will measure it for you. So I eyeball it. I know what 1,800 feet looks like, 1,500 feet, 300 feet. I eyeball it, and I think, okay, it's close enough to draw the line. I draw the line and then it tells me how long it is. And then if it's too long, then I take it off. And if it's the right length, I make the right color for it.
Mm.
Because I wanted to make circles, which actually shows, you know, the radius of a, that would be much easier to do for each site and you could see the connections, but Google Map, at least as far as I can figure out, has not let me do that yet.
We have some scenarios. Let me just make this smaller.
I think Aaron, I'm not sure how you say your name, had a question.
Is there any good way to get a list and a list of sources?
It's on the handout. We list all the plants that we have gone through. Have we? Is it? It's not on the handout.
Okay.
And at the end, there's a list of online plant places and in-person places to shop for plants. Is that right, Brucey?
Yes, we have the powerhouse plants list. Let's see. Oh, those are the lists. Wait a minute. The sources. Yes, we do have sources. And it's called Where to Buy Native Plants, both in person and online. And some local plant sales coming up.
Okay.
And our organization has student plant sales in the summer. Meadowscaping for Biodiversity, meadowmaking.org. We don't want to overwhelm you. And while we'd love for people to just rip out their lawns and make a huge garden, you can start pretty small. You know, this is just a sunny pollinator patch. It's maybe 8 plants up against a fence. Someone had extra space off their driveway. Here's someone who lived in a condo and needed to share the design with 3 different layers of the condo and wanted a little bit of grass. I mean, so you can start small. This is my home, and Barbara and I tore out English ivy, and we started to introduce. I can make it a little bit bigger. We started to introduce native plants, but I also threw in a squash plant, and I threw in some cherry tomatoes, and so in the first year it was just very experimental, and slowly I have edited this garden. It's pretty dense right now, but it is solely native. As I move around the back where I have a lot of shade, and I'm also editing, and I'm getting rid of hosta and I'm putting something in. I'm getting rid of pachysandra and I'm getting something in. And if you remove an invasive plant anywhere, there's a vacuum that you should fill right away with a native plant. So that's just something. This is Sarah's experiment. Sarah, you want to talk about what you did here?
Oh, I planted this curb strip last summer in the drought, and it was kind of tough. I mean, I mulched a lot last summer to try to keep the moisture in, and it's been pretty successful, I would say, except for the butterfly weed, which does come up late. I've only lost 2 plants out of, I don't know, it's a 40-foot strip. It's got a lot of different, and it's experimental in that, you know, I only have like 1 of each kind of plant to see how they're doing. So there's a lot of different plants in there.
Did you scatter? Did you scatter any seed, or is it all?
Oh, no, I'm not a good seed planter.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Sorry.
This is for the climate group that when we say functional gardens, native plants have other features besides just being food for pollinators. They establish deep roots, and those deep roots help to filter stormwater runoff. They help to sequester carbon. They provide tons of food that's, as Brucey said, regenerating the soil. And as you garden, the more you garden, and I hope, Aaron, you can at some point, as you dig your plants out, you'll find worms and fungi dangling off the roots. there's so much food in there for our underground creatures. So this is an example of one thing about our pollinator group. We have monthly meetings, and we invited the head of the planning department of Arlington to share with us what the Arlington did to put bioretention basins. Their concern was managing stormwater runoff. But fortunately, the head of the Conservation Commission is very concerned about native plants. The combination is perfect here. So you're managing the stormwater and you're feeding the pollinators at the same time. We want other towns to embrace this. Cambridge has done a few, not sure what Watertown has done, but it's just so logical. Or you have a big puddle in your backyard. There's opportunity for rain swale. And the reason Fresh Pond could say no pesticides is their tree birth, everything around that fresh water there is to prevent, that's their drinking water. So they don't want anything going into it. So they have built swales, and they have built up berms and native trees to filter. So everything that's going into the water, of course, they have a pumping filtering station there, but so these are just some points that we like to remind people of. Plants will tell you where they are happiest, but why not understand your garden a little better to begin with? If a plant needs full sun, put it in full sun. If a plant needs shade, put it in shade. So read your garden, understand the soil conditions. Great to do the seasonal foraging. Diversity is key. And quantity in diversity. People always say, what do I do about the bunnies? Plant more. Plant the banquet, plant it for everyone, and lots of it. And cluster species is good. It makes it more efficient for our bees and butterflies to go to all one plant to get their snack. And then when that plant is done, it tells the bee it's done. It changes color, it dies off. I love it. That bee knows I can't get anything else here, so I'll go to the next section. Leave nothing bare. That's, just fill in. So if we can give you ground covers. There's a lot to fill in between the interstices of your plants. And then true natives. We like to emphasize reading plant labels, 2 names, the Latin genus and species, and that should be it on that label. No foo-foo hat or frilly-dilly, whatever. But there are, and we could supply it, there are some cultivars that are okay for bees. But the more frilly, generally, the more frilly, the more fancy that plant has become by someone in the botany field, the less recognizable it is by the bee or the butterfly. So you want a plant that is close to true native as possible. I think that's it. Yeah. So.
Aaron,
Thank you very much. It's great. Tons of information.
Okay, great.
I
Thanks.
do have one thing to say.
Okay.
Worms are non-native.
What's a non-native?
Worms.
Worms are
Earthworms.
non-native. Yeah, I've been reading about the new invaders.
Yeah,
that
you said tons of worms, and I'm like, well, that's non-native.
Well, yeah, honeybees are not native too, and
I know.
Yeah.
I have a problem with those.
That is true, and I don't. Anyone have a response? I love worms, and I love what they're doing down there. So I like their presence, but I know what you're saying.
They were brought here by Europeans.
Yeah.
So is the house sparrow.
Right. Is there anything as efficient in changing out your soil as a worm?
I don't know, but I just wanted to find out that they are non-native.
the question is what are they squeezing out, right? Because they must be displacing something in the ecosystem.
I don't know the names of the specific plants that are affected by this, but there are certain forest wildflowers that evolved to grow on several feet thick of leaf duff. And the worms break it down so fast, they have nothing to grow in.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
I was
Have you-
just going to suggest maybe this to stop the screen sharing so we can all see each other better.
Sure. Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry.
And it looks like Barbara has a question or a comment.
Barbara.
Please go ahead.
You have to there.
There it goes. So we've been doing the meadowscaping for about 7 years, and for 4 years, we've been doing the youth environmental entrepreneurship program, where we hire students to work on people's property. So it's been really successful the last few years with COVID. We've been doing so many yards, and we need to mark them on Sarah's map.
Right.
I like it. It's my map.
What is your map? We have so many properties. We've done thousands of feet of pollinators. We're working on one in Arlington right now. That's very big. I don't know how many feet that is, Jean.
About 1,000.
So we are really doing a lot to help people put in the pollinator patches, and some people understand and then other people don't understand anything about native plants, or they've watched so much TV, they think that the coleus is a native plant, or they think, stop, I've got a rental cat here. Be quiet. My friends are moving and they left me their cats, and one of them just talks all the time. Can you hear him?
Yeah.
Anyway, so you guys, if you need help in any way, if you know an elderly neighbor who would like to have a garden, just we're going to have a sale on June 14th, something, I think.
June 12th.
And we're going to so you can buy the plants from us and we can put them in, and you get a we can design your landscape for you, or we can help you work on a design. So I think we're doing pretty good work helping people out, and we've got to get out to the public more that we're doing this kind of work, and we need people to understand that you can't do what Watertown did in buying all those plants that aren't good for the environment. I mean, they bought some are good, I guess, but it's so important now.
No, it turns out that there were a few cultivars over at that site, but there were a lot of natives.
So those pictures didn't show what they were really putting in. So anyway,
I wrote down some.
matters, the soil matters, the everything matters today, because so much land has been stopped. Go away. So much land has been developed, and there's so many pesticides out there. I was just reading in a nursery magazine about pesticide drift, herbicide drift, and the drift of herbicides when it's windy. That's why that's my theory. So much cancer. That was Rachel Carson's theory too. Why there's so much cancer is the drift of pesticides. So we don't use any pesticides. We don't use anything except native plants, except a couple plants that are really attractive to attract bees. So our hearts are in the right place, and we employ students, so we have them. They get a salary, they get an hourly wage, and they love being outside. And so we're helping a lot of people do a lot of things that are, and we want to really help the environment. I mean, I think Jean and I are passionate about helping the environment, because it's another way that we can protect the future that doesn't have to do actually with saving gas or that kind of thing. We can save ourselves in our own backyards, is what we say. So thanks very much. I have wonderful programs so far. Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any more questions, or shall we move on to announcements? But that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks for including us. It's nice to spread the word.
Do we have announcements?
Oh.
I know Deborah and I talked about sharing information about a vigil that's happening on May 22nd, this coming Saturday. And it's to help protest and get the word out and keep it in people's forefronts of their minds about the horrendous killing of 85 Afghani schoolgirls earlier in the month. And a young Afghani woman who came to our last refugee support group meeting, who's also a refugee, had asked for help. And so we are helping to promote that. And a flyer was made. And I can try to see if I can screen share this flyer for a moment. Oh, it's not opening on my computer yet. And here it is. Can you all see that?
Yes.
So it will be at 7 p.m. on Saturday in Watertown Square. And people are encouraged to bring signs, whatever, and there will be an effort, I think, to hand out some electric tea candles. Some people may bring actual candles. Someone to share, promise to share that with people.
That's awful. What
Yeah.
an awful thing.
Any other announcements? Arun, I think you put something in the chat. You just stuff about the George Floyd memorial. You're muted.
You're muted, Arun.
We don't have a Zoom link yet. That's the problem.
Okay.
Reflection, but hopefully we'll have one soon, and we'll send it out. And I might ask that we send it out on the PGA announcements too.
Do you
Okay.
want people to put their numbers in the chat? Or maybe am I muted?
So to the person on the Pisgusset initiative, have you ever read the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer?
You know, I have that on my list. I actually have the book myself, and I have started the beginning of it. Some of my friends have read it and discussed it, and I've talked to them about it. I've also heard her speak, and she's quite amazing. So it's definitely an important book to read, I think, for everybody. And
actually, I got into it because I did it as a book on tape. So you might find that, you know, you can listen while you garden. But
okay.
I was just talking to someone today about the Three Sisters gardening.
Yes.
You know, and I'm sure there's several people who have tried the combination, but several schools do that too. But we try to remind our youth of the indigenous people's approach to the land and respect for it. We also teach about environmental justice with guest speakers, but yeah, I love her book. It's so soothing.
I don't know if you've heard, but at the Massachusetts Fine Arts Museum in Boston, there's that statue, the Dallin statue, and they're going to be putting a Three Sisters planting all around it.
Oh, wow.
Bring it into more of a contemporary indigenous perspective as opposed to a settler perspective of indigenous people. And so that should be an interesting installation to look for.
Oh, thanks. Sounds neat.
What was the name of the book again?
Braiding Sweetgrass by
Braiding-
Robin Kimmerer.
It's been on the bestseller list. It's in paperback now, and it's been on the bestseller list for ages.
I thought it was familiar.
A friend of mine who's Native American has read it multiple times, and she keeps saying, "You got to read it. You got to read it." And I'm like, "I know I can read it."
Does it talk about that the three sisters being originally like plants that you would like hard beans and field corn?
And that relationship, is so important. They all support each other, both above the ground and below the ground, and their timing. She has a section just on asters and goldenrod too.
Wow. Very important plants.
Yeah, my favorite. Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, we're probably yeah. I mean, it's cool to not be the person who's ranting about bees for an hour.
Well, you know what? In our one version of the slideshow, but it was getting talk, we showed the and I don't know how many other bee folks are here, but this Robert Jagir has taken research on at-risk bees in Massachusetts, as you know, and we showed that chart that the Bombus impatiens is on the rise. It is the only one of the bees that seems to be doing okay, but all the other ones are really declining and at risk. And he divides the state in half based on the altitudes, right? So if we were in Western Mass, we would be planting slightly different things for these bees. But yeah, very impressive research, I guess, that he's doing.
Nice.
Okay.
Any other announcements that people have? Or any other questions or comments?
Well, our plant sale on June 14, our native plant sale. We'll put out a flyer, Jean, for this
Yeah.
so that you can,
So where will it be held, Barbara?
I hope at the UU Church in Waltham
Uh-huh.
on 50 Church Street.
Is there a time frame yet?
I don't know.
The church is deciding how to open up after COVID. I guess other groups are, so they haven't yet committed to that date, but that's the date we propose. It's Saturday, June 12th, and it would probably start around.
Well,
June 12th is a Saturday, so it'd probably
I thought
start
it was the 14th.
9 or 10.
June
Like
12th is
9:30 to 10. But if Pam communicates with you, we can send material to Pam to share.
Great.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
well, I took a quick look at your handout. It pulls things together really nicely. And I've also posted, there's a couple of things that I put up on the website. One was my own collection of local plant sales, which probably has a lot of overlap with what you guys have found out about. And my version of the powerhouse plants in the pollinator recommendations. But
Oh, good.
Lucy, yes, please.
Yes, I just want to jump in and mention the Massachusetts Pollinator Network. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's housed with NOFA Mass, Northeast Organic Farming Association. And it is just starting up now. It will provide resources to individuals, organizations, and communities as they work to support native pollinators across the state. And I get providing resources, we hope eventually mentoring, potentially, and so that each organization or person doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, go out and find out what's working and what's being done in the area.
What is it called again?
It's called the Massachusetts Pollinator Network, and there is a link to it in the handout. But if you were to Google Massachusetts Pollinator Network NOFA Mass, it would come right up. And they've just hired their first coordinator.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, this is really exciting.
Well, I think, are we coming to a conclusion of this meeting. Sort of a natural feeling like we could just end like 3 minutes early unless there's something else someone is just dying to say, or besides, again, tremendous thanks. Yes.
I
Steve.
just want to say in the handout, if people are getting ready to go garden, there's a list. It's Sarah, is it Northampton Pollinator recommendations, and it's a spreadsheet. And on the bottom are tabs that say shade garden, sun garden, mailbox garden. So you can hone in on just like a few plants that would work in that situation. So it's a useful tool. So that those handouts, Sarah organized that handout, and it's beautiful.
Terrific.
Yeah, that link is Pollinator Northampton.
Okay.
Pollinate Northampton, native plants. And it is an overwhelming spreadsheet, but like Jean said, there are tabs at the bottom that will give you sub lists that are not quite so overwhelming.
That's it.
But they are, I mean, they give you bloom time and height and spread and how much sun and how much moisture. So all the kind of critical information you actually need, but you never think about when you're looking at plants.
Right. Well, thank you again so very much. This is terrific, and it's very inspiring, very inspiring. And some of us will be in touch, I think.
Great.
And the handout is a great resource.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are welcome. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Night.
Good night. Have a nice night.
Y'all too.